Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Christy Pettis. I'm the Food Standards Manager here at Natural Grocers. I'm joined today by our co-hosts Alan Lewis and Elizabeth Bennett of Natural Grocers as well. So these work group meetings are focused on the dual challenge of ensuring shoppers can trust a regenerative claim and preventing brands that don't meet a minimum standard from using the term. So our goal is not to create a new seal. We're not starting a new certification. Our goal is to establish a consensus standard that retailers like ourselves, brands, and producers can all use to meet consumer expectations. Our session today will specifically address different tillage practices that affect soil health, reduce weed pressure, and incorporate organic matter, with a focus on how they may seem to sometimes conflict with the principles of regenerative ag. So one of the frictions we must navigate through this process is economics. Transitioning a farm takes time, it carries a financial risk. We need to determine, how do we incentivize farmers and brands during the transition period? Which practices should be stopped cold turkey? Which practices require a drawdown? And where do we draw a line on different tillage and cultivation practices to meet an informed consumer expectation of a regenerative claim? So please remember, this initiative is not about calling out conventional producers. It's about supporting those who are committed to a verifiable regenerative path. Also, we have discussed soil health and fertility in some of our prior sessions. You can watch any of those online. But our next deep dive topic will be on ruminant livestock, and that will be on August 6th. So please keep your eyes out for those invitations. Some engagement guidelines for today. Your participant video and audio will be turned off during the panelist discussion moderated by and hosted by Alan, and it will be turned on later, about 45 minutes in, for the Q&A portion. We're asking today that as you do participate, that you focus your comments on specific points of friction and technical complexity. Please dig deep. And if you would like to send a chat or a comment, please use the chat feature and message Elizabeth Bennett. You can submit panelist questions directly to Elizabeth at any point during that via the Zoom chat feature, and any written comments can be sent. And when it comes to that time, later in the discussion, Elizabeth will read your questions and comments out loud. We will also have a portion to share verbally. So during that segment, you can use the Zoom raise hand feature. Someone will call on you and you can provide and share your perspective at that time live with the group. Alan will announce that at the beginning of that section, so you know that you can turn on your camera and microphone. This meeting, like our others, is being recorded for distribution. And we expect and welcome different points of view based on practical experience today. That's why we're here, to have a nuanced discussion. And while we may have managed that conflict differently during a Zoom panel, please rest assured we are collecting all the perspectives. And to that end, you can certainly access and use the iPhone link posted periodically in the Zoom chat to leave any detailed public comments. That resource has all the other meeting discussions, future upcoming meetings. Everything is there on the iPhone site. So right now I'm going to pass the microphone over to Alan Lewis. He is our Vice President of Advocacy at Natural Grocers. He's an active member of various organizations, including the iPhone North America Board, and he will be your host today for this event. So with that, I'll pass it over to Alan.
Thank you so much, Christy. Alan Lewis here, VP at Natural Grocers. I need to turn this page. Good morning. I also need to thank our host and partner, the nonprofit International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements, also known as Organics International, for sponsoring this series on their website, iPhoneNorthAmerica.org, and supporting the success and reach of these important stakeholder sessions to a global audience. iPhone Organics International supports the global effort to produce nutritious food with health, fairness, ecology, and care using regenerative methods. Through this cooperative guideline setting initiative, we hope to facilitate a consensus about what materials and practice should prevent a regenerative claim on a retail food product. This is not a definition of regenerative. It is an actionable set of guardrails for retailers and shoppers and brands. Today, we're addressing the complex issue of tillage practices, which is a thorn in many of our sides. To make it easier for everyone to follow the conversation, we're breaking it up into 4 distinct parts. At the end, we'll try to pull those parts together like good organic regenerative systems thinking people do. First, we'll consider no-till supply chains whose methods include bioengineered seeds, synthetic nitrogen, synthetic pesticides, and monoculture planting. Second, we'll contrast conventional chemical no-till with organic no-till, which Dr. Chris is especially familiar with. Then we'll move on to discussing appropriate types of tilling within regenerative farming systems at different scales. Mr. Brown is joining us for that. He just joined us. Hello, Mr. Brown. How the overall outcomes can be both climate positive and environmentally beneficial. Next, we'll talk about the role of non-chemical cultivation practices, which are somewhat distinct from tillage, but often get lumped in as something that's bad, and we'd like to correct that impression. Finally, we'll address food, community, farm, and economics in the future of regenerative systems. And we're adding that in because inevitably the audience that attracted to these sessions wants to talk about those very important issues on top of the narrow subject, in this case, tillage and cultivation. So I'm giving some very brief introductions to our panelists. And there they are at their best. Dr. Chris Nichols addresses agricultural needs by exploring the similarities between soil and gut microbiome, which is one of my passions. She builds upon a soil health foundation to identify biological methods for agricultural production, which does not do her justice. W.B. Brown, Brown's Place Farm is a certified organic market farm located in Columbia County, Grovetown, Georgia, serving good quality food to the Augusta community. And finally, Dr. Anna Jones Crabtree. Anna has championed sustainability throughout her 26-plus federal career and personal life. She routinely cultivates key pilot project and pioneers new approaches to supporting place-based work of local sustainable champions. And what that doesn't say is she runs some very big organic grain and legume farms up in the northern plains. Okay. Last thing is a quick reminder. We're assuming throughout this that people who are joining us are relatively up to speed about regenerative practices. So we've actually asked the panelists not to dig too deep explaining those things, but get to the areas of tension and conflict that we're trying to create to facilitate the discussion. So bear with us on that. How about a question to the panel? We're right on time, 10 minutes after, and you've heard us going on, but sometimes we need the setup to be effective. First thing we're going to talk about is conventional no-till with heavy chemical use. And we're talking about this because there are many brands and companies and conglomerates that raise up chemical no-till as regenerative and as a solution to climate and environmental issues. If you're on this call, you probably take issue with that, but we're going to take a look. Here is the core of chemical no-till. So you get the idea. And I got to say that conventional farmers on their TikTok and Facebook videos, they rock it with the music. I've only got a couple of these videos and they're very short throughout this. So just a heads up. So Anna, let's start with you. What is the chemical no-till community overlooking here when they call this regenerative? The issue is that there's at least four standard applications of pesticides on a no-till. It's pre-plant, they're burning down what's ever in the field. And then when the spring seeds start to sprout and come up, they spray it again. At planting, they're going to do additional in-soil applications to prevent things around the target crop from growing. And then while the crops are growing, they're going to spray it again for any number of things. So the question for you is, what are they missing here when they think of this as regenerative?
Hi, friends. Thanks for the opportunity to engage with all of you. I'm calling in from the border of Montana and Alberta and Saskatchewan, where Doug and I have a 14,000 acre organic farm. We've started as first generation in Montana and have been lucky enough to transition 6,300 and some acres from this Kim Fallow no-till system into organic production. So Doug likes to say that we're in a ecosystem where the surrounding farm systems around us grow wheat and not wheat. So if you can think about that, we're also in an ecosystem that has 11 to 12 inches of moisture a year. So what everybody is attempting to optimize around us is really that moisture. And the idea that is, if you don't do any tillage, then you also aren't allowing your soil to blow. And we have much lighter sandy loam soils. But if all you're growing is wheat and then a year of not wheat or chemical fallow, where your disturbance is chemical, and anything green growing is seen as not a good thing because it's using the moisture, that's not the best thing for your soil. There's no growing roots in your soil. The monoculture is still there. And the trick is that we're still farming in big blocks. So for Doug and I, we look really different from the sky. If you look at our farm compared to the farms around us, we have a whole layout of, we call it ecological infrastructure. So we have prairie strips, over 299 miles of prairie strips. So every 240-foot strip of crop, then there's another 30 or 20 feet of prairie strip. So for us, it's really about optimizing ecology, optimizing biodiversity, not just looking at the one issue of soil erosion from wind. And you've soil, like Chris will talk about this, I'm sure. Soil is like your gut, right? Like if all you feed it is wheat, you're going to be pretty sick if you don't get some lentils or peas or flax or safflower or other types of grains.
Chris, that's a good transition to the question for you. So go ahead and unmute. But from your perspective, you dig into this so deeply in your research. Can you actually apply synthetic nitrogen, herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides repeatedly in this no-till so-called regenerative system without causing long-term negative consequences to soil biodiversity, biodiversity, water quality, and public health? Is that even a legitimate thought?
Well, I think that's a really important point to be making, and just this last year, I moved away from Canada. I was in Canada for about 5 years, and I moved to Minnesota to my dad's farm back in Minnesota. And my dad is not an organic farmer. He's not really fully a regenerative farmer. So, I have to admit that in what it is that I'm saying. But, I'm continuing to work with him and build the understanding. And so I think it's really important that you're having these sessions, because knowledge, I think, is the biggest power that we have. And so, talking about that knowledge, it very much is true that when you are adding a lot of chemicals to the system, what ends up happening is a couple of different things. I mean, one, obviously the pesticides that you're adding, the insecticides and fungicides, you're not just with the insecticides killing the above ground insects that you can see, the macroscopic insects, but the insecticides will also kill the microscopic microarthropods. They're microarthropods, but arthropod is a word for insect. So it's basically what you're ending up doing is you're going to be killing those microarthropods. And one of the things that the microarthropods do is they help to break down and prep a lot of the food for the bacteria and the fungi to be able to process. So even if you're just adding an insecticide and not adding a fungicide or a nematicide that targets nematodes, what you end up doing is affecting the ability for the bacteria and the fungi as a whole to get that food that they need to have. And as Anna was sort of indicating about the continuous wheat, the other thing that we end up doing in a lot of our high input systems where we're adding a lot of chemicals is that it allows us to basically design a system in which we can have a monoculture or a biculture. And what that does, in addition to the chemicals, is it really reduces the diversity of the organisms that are there. If you don't have the diversity above ground, you're certainly not going to have the diversity below ground. And then that ends up having a cascading effect on, without that diversity, on the ability for the system to actually respond to a lot of the challenges it's going to see. So it becomes much more difficult to respond to other pests. Many of the organisms in the soil can help with in not just improving the plant health, but also can directly impact other insect pests or other diseases that may be in the system and reduce their issues and their problems, so that you aren't seeing that level of pest issues that you have. So again, it becomes a cascading effect when it is that you're using chemicals. When you add a lot of chemical fertilizers, unlike the pesticides, you may not be killing organisms that are involved in the process. You may not be killing them directly, but adding a lot of chemical fertilizers, what I say is it basically outsources the jobs of the microbial community, because the microbial community in the soil is, most of the members are either directly or indirectly involved in nutrient cycling processes. And when you add those chemical fertilizers, what you end up doing is you outsource their jobs. And so they don't end up getting the exudates from the plants. The microarthropods aren't there to help to prep residue. And so they're not getting fed. And when, we all know when a job gets outsourced from a community, the entire community starts to collapse.
So,
And
Mr.
you're
Brown,
seeing that
I'm so happy to have Wiley Brown here of Brown's Place Farm down in Georgia. And we have so much knowledge in this panel, even though it's just 3 people. But Mr. Brown, would you jump in and talk about what Chris and Anna have presented? Because you actually grow food for your community on a certified organic farm. And I'm guessing that your feelings on chemical no-till are relatively strong. So unmute yourself and chime in. I mean, do you see any value to this? And just introduce yourself and talk about what you do on your farm. Secret government team to surveil his organic farm, and I found him on a tractor tilling. So we're going to ask him.
Are we there now?
Yeah, we got an echo, but we can hear you.
Okay, then. Let's see if we can fix this thing some kind of way.
There you go.
With
You
me,
got it. That's it.
the savvy here.
For the
That
video,
works.
I have to click on it.
We can hear you just fine right now.
Y'all hear me now?
Yes. There's a little echo, but let's keep going. I got a picture of you and your farm up on the screen, but we were talking
Okay.
about chemical no-till
Yes,
and what your feelings
My
are
name,
about it.
I'm here in Grovetown, Georgia. I have about a 20-acre farm, and I am a certified organic vegetable farmer. I grow a large variety of vegetables. And my situation as far as no-till and controlling pesticides and growing vegetables, my biggest thing is growing quality vegetables. And how I do that is preparing the soil in order to grow the best type of vegetables. My situation here, I'm on a sandy plot of land, and I require a lot of organic matter in order to grow vegetables. And my system here is when I plant my vegetables, I make sure that my soil is in the right condition and everything. And as I grow vegetables, I found out that the more healthy your vegetables are, the less chemical, as far as pesticides, I would need. I use very little chemicals in my situation, and I grow several types of vegetables. As far as no-till is concerned, I try to control as many weeds and other unwanted weeds and stuff in mine by trying not to let them mature. I try to keep down all the grass and all of the weeds and everything as early as soon as they come up, I try to get rid of them. As a result of that, I have very little grass seeds and other types of seeds in my soil. And it's quite a task for me to do all of that. I do a bunch of burn methods and stuff like that in order to do that. In my situation, I do very good at that. And as far as no-till is concerned, you have to plant cover crops also. I plant several cover crops. My field never be bare, you might say, just land. I have something growing there all the time, even in the winter. And when there's no vegetables there, there's cover crops there. And I have been able to control my weeds and other stuff like that very good. And it allows me to grow a real good vegetable crop. That's how I see this thing. As far as organic is concerned, it is so very important that we maintain our organic integrity in growing vegetables. That's something in my area I have a problem with my neighbors and other farmers is being able to maintain the integrity of organic farming. And that is something that we as organic people should be very mindful of that. And that
Brown,
is how I do my farm here. Any other questions y'all would like to
We
throw
got a
on me?
lot.
I'm willing to answer, but that's my situation.
We got
I
a lot
grow
more
about,
questions.
Like I say, I have about 20 acres here, and I grow goats in my farm here, and I do pretty good. Yes.
Nice. We have a lot more questions for you coming. Now I'm going to ambush Chris Nichols here, just for the fun of it. But we're going to move on to the second part, which is talking about organic no-till. And Chris, when you think of one of your areas of expertise was managing the no-till trials at Rodale, where cover crops are crimped down with a roller and seeds planted through them into the soil. Here's the video of that. Can you briefly, as best you can, explain how this system works? This is just 10 seconds.
Yeah. So as you can see, when the system is moving, you have the roller crimper in the front and a planter in the back. And that's the most efficient and effective way to be doing this. So you basically have a crop that is a standing green crop, and you're rolling it down. And specifically the roller crimper tool, what it is doing is it is not slicing through or breaking the stem, or slicing through or cutting the stem, I should say. What it's doing is it's causing a little bit of a break or a crimp in the stem, and it's doing that in multiple places. And the reason that this works so effectively is that you're doing this at a time in which the plant is starting to set seed or is going into the reproductive phase. And so a lot of the carbon resources, instead of being in the root ball, where it would then, if you just laid down or mowed down the plants could easily utilize those carbon resources and start to regrow. But when you're doing the roller crimper, when most of the carbon resources are now in the foliar tissue and in the fruiting bodies, they're going to basically, what you end up doing is the carbon that you would need to regrow that would normally be in the root ball that is on the other side of all of these bends and crimps and kinks in the stem. So damage in the stem and the leaves. And there's so much damage in the stems and the leaves as opposed to a single slice that would happen with mowing, that the carbon you need to cover those, to basically seal off those wounds, those bends and crimps that are there, that carbon is up here in the foliar tissue on the other side of the crimps, those bends, and it's not down here in the root ball where you could utilize that carbon to then be able to seal off those wounds.
A big important distinction here is that in chemical no-till, they're so used to using herbicides that they would take a relatively green, that looks like a rye cover crop there, and actually terminate it with glyphosate to dry it out, and then go through a crimping drilling process. And that's really, when you hear them just so wedded to the pesticide application, it's kind of startling. I wanted to talk to Mr. Brown here, because you do this on a human scale, sometimes with rakes, your small tractor, hose or whatnot, but you are doing this, maintaining your cover crops, laying them down at a small scale. Can you just tie those two together, since you don't have 500 acres of a row crop that you are, or a grain crop that you're managing? Oh,
What about now?
got a little echo, but we got you.
Okay, then.
That's good.
I do a lot of as far as a small farm like myself. I do a lot of I would say preventive measures as far as grass is concerned and no-till situation. I do a lot of you might say preventive stuff in order to grow vegetables. I till a lot as far as small tilling. I'm doing a lot of tilling, but I try to maintain as much vegetables or something on my property as much as possible. As far as small scale is concerned, I'm kind of lost for words for right now. Could you come back to me later, a minute or two?
Yeah, no problem. Anna, you gave us a very eloquent description of regenerative systems with multiple crops and prairie strips, and always keeping it covered. Would you tell us again how that organic system works without the chemicals? I know it's a bit of a repetition, but when we're talking about the difference between chemical no-till and organic till, and we're looking at this cool little video here, I just like you to kind of drive this home for us.
Sure, yeah. Let's see if I can do that. And with all due respect, I just want to roller crimper work and Chris, I think that's really helped elevate this discussion. But in our system, organic no-till is not really possible. It's a dry land system. So if I was to go roller crimp our rye, you gotta have moisture in the stems you can crimp. And our rye would just be like, I'm back. I'm here, I'm growing. We actually have rye that's showing up from 3 years ago because it hangs in the soil. So for us, it's, and Doug's really the expert here on the agronomy and the crop rotation, but for us, it's really about how are you maintaining or improving that natural resource. That is in the organic standard, right? So in our system, we have a really diverse crop rotation of 7 years. We've laid our farms out in a way that temporally and spatially supports nature. It's about optimizing the ecology. We are the largest Be Better certified farm on the planet. We have over 600 acres of native pollinator habitat that we've intentionally seeded. We are also a proud member of the Real Organic Project because we feel like that engagement with the soil is so important. Like nature wants us to be her collaborator. And if you're not out there engaging with your soil in some way and understanding what your plants and your farms needs, we're missing the boat. On Monday, we spent most of the day out with our regenerative organic certification inspector, and I see Alania's on here. So Alania, we had a great time. We no findings. However, for that certification, we will never be able to achieve gold because that standard requires no tillage. In our system, we really look hard at what is the purpose of the tillage, what is the conditions, and what do you want to gain from it. So we have, I think, 6 different tillage tools on this farm, and the tillage itself is also part of, in a way, the rotation. We do mow-board plow before our non-competitive crops like lentils and flax. That's once a time in the rotation. We don't do any tillage in advance of our cover crop planting. So we go right in with our drill and we plant that diverse mix of tillage radish and turnips and millet and oats and things. And then the other source of disturbance that we're recently engaged in over the last 5 years is we actually are integrating grazing into our rotation. So we're working with 4 other ranches this year that need more pasture for their cattle. They're actually up here grazing on our strips. And man, if you look at a tillage picture, and then you can look at where cows have been and intensively grazed and actually process that rye crop, I mean, there's disturbance on the soil either way, but both of those we're giving back. So it's like, what are you giving back? What are you doing to build the soil and build that ecological community?
That was perfect. Thank you. I get frustrated with the big brands that claim they're doing regenerative agriculture. There's very cherry-picked locations, and their claim to regenerative, which we'll talk about later, is that there's some climate or soil benefit as opposed to all of these externalized costs, let's call them. I'm not going to read through these kind of summaries of beneficial tillage, but I wanted people to see that. They're on the session webpage as well. Anna, you just mentioned this, but we're going to have some fun here with Chris, because here's tillage that's so bad for everybody, and yet we're going to ask Chris what it's doing for the soil. What happened here?
So
here we go.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say we got to up our game on the soundtrack. Organic people like to hear tractors. Conventional people got some rockin' songs with their TikToks. But look at what this is doing. So, Chris, what do you see here as a soil scientist?
So when we're looking at these tillage tools, and especially this type of a tool that you've got, I mean, what you're doing is, yes, doing some soil disturbance, but as Anna said, even with animals or other types of things, anything we're doing is going to disturb the soil. And the soil does need a certain amount of natural disturbance, wind and water, earth movement, all of that is natural soil disturbance. And, as long as we're kind of keeping that disturbance so that we're not disturbing a huge amount of the soil. I mean, as I look at this, it's very much a surface type of a disturbance that you have there. You're not really getting into where a lot of the biology is. You're helping to break up. In this case, you're breaking up a lot of the stalks and the roots from the previous annual crop, which is then providing a food source to the microbial community. Everything needs to be broken down into little itty bitty bits, kind of going back to this link to the gut microbiome. Your mother was right. We need to chew very well. And what the microarthropods and what a tool like this is doing is it's chewing the food for the bacteria and the fungi. So we want to have that effective chewing so that the bacteria and fungi and the microarthropods can get access to it and process it. And, if that's one of the things that we're doing with our tillage tools, that can be a very effective way to be able to manage the system without doing a huge amount of disturbance to the microbial community.
So Anna, this is something that you mentioned, and guys, I'm 5-year-olds at heart. I watch tillage videos for 24 hours straight. You can have Cardi B. This is my jam. But this is deep moldboard plowing, and this is what contributed to the Dust Bowl when farmers broke up the sod and left that soil bare and turned over and uncovered, and the wind picked it up and created that huge problem. This is for Anna because she's got a really good perspective on this. Now watch this music, organic farmers. This is how it should be done. Oh. My bad, no music on that, but Anna, I'm gonna play this a few times while you respond. But this is turning the soil over, and the seeds and surface material are also being placed into the soil where they can be absorbed.
Yeah, again, it's about which tool, what conditions, what's the purpose. So we do moldboard plow, 8 inches once in our crop rotation, and that's in advance of low competitive plants like lentils. And this year it's been pretty interesting because timing here for us is everything. It's all about when is the moisture coming? When is nature ready to give you moisture? Are you ready? Is your stuff out in the field ready? So for us, we did plow quite a few of our lentil acres, but there were some that we just couldn't get to. And then we ended up just using our speed tiller, which is a high-speed disc that's like 2 inches. And while the seed beds ended up looking very similar, like you can see it in the crop now. Our lentil crops that were plowed, like no weeds, very clean fields. The lentil crops that were not plowed didn't get that reset. And so they're a lot more weedy, which will cause us to do, we swath everything and then dry stuff down. But that's another impact on us in terms of cleaning the cost out, cleaning the plants out later.
So when Chemical No-Still claims that they're avoiding plowing like this, they're really dodging the complexity of a system that is ultimately benefiting the soil, benefiting yields and farmers, and likely growing soil carbon, sequestering more carbon as well. But it's more of a propaganda point that they're not telling, but they also don't have, in my mind, a beneficial system overall. Is that anyone want to chime in with that statement?
I would say that's somewhat true, Alan. And it's not that our neighbors are terrible farmers and they're doing these awful things. I think they all want to take care of their natural resources. The larger challenge is we have agricultural system that is not growing positive economic soil around any farmer right now. So farmers that are our neighbors, you're stuck in a system of subsidies and you're stuck in a system of crop insurance. It's easy to get crop insurance for wheat. We would make more money on our farm if all we did was grow wheat. We would be assured a base income level. Is that the right thing to do for the natural resources? I would say not. So part of our trick with this whole community discussion is we all want positive benefits for the planet and people, but we have to figure out how we're not outsourcing all those positive benefits on the backs of farmers to do it and make the transition themselves. And it's more than the transition too. It's not just like, 3 years and suddenly it's magic and everything works great. We had 3 horrid years of drought on this farm and we're still trying to come out of that. And you see it in your soil, but I'll tell you, our soils were much more resilient than the stuff that we've been transitioning that was Fallow no-till. And it's really fun. If any of you want to come, one more thing, come visit and you can sit in a big tractor with a big tillage tool. It's like, WB's got got the smaller tools, we've got bigger tools. It's the same thing. Like whether you're out there with a hoe or you're out there with a 60-foot chisel, you're engaging with the soil. And we can totally feel the difference when you run a tillage tool between the soil that we've been managing since 2009 when we started and the soil that we're just now taking over under another 1,800 acres of transition and out of Kimfella no-till.
So use tillage and cultivation tools appropriately within a properly designed system. Mr. Brown, we're back to you, and you are up on screen again. What's your response to all this? I mean, you don't have 16-foot moldboards on your farm, but can you double down on the small human scale that you operate at? The proper tillage is really critical to a productive farm.
Yes, I do a small amount of. I do a small amount of tillage, and most of mine is with a small tractor like mine. I do a lot of tilling, but I don't do no deep tilling. Like I saw in the previous picture you had on the thing there. I don't do that type of tilling. Most of my stuff is small, and if you do it a regular, when I plant a crop, before I plant another crop, I do a small amount of tilling, and as a result of that, I disturb the soil no more. Once I've tilled it that first time and plant my plants, the soil is not bothered no more until the next time I get ready to plant again. So my soil is not disturbed that much. As a result of that, I have very few weeds and other type of stuff there, and that serves me quite well. The less you disturb your soil, the better off you are. And in my situation, it has worked for me really well. In a small situation like mine, all you need is a small bit of tilling and maintain not letting your grass mature so that it puts seeds in the ground. So long as you do that small amount of tilling, your soil turns out quite well. And as a result of that, you have to put very little more chemicals in your soil to grow good vegetables. I have to put a lot of compost and stuff like that, but other than that, I don't disturb the soil that much at all.
Yeah, I think that's great. I wanted to comment on, well, I'm going to wait. I got another question for you a little bit farther down. But it's interesting that in the organic systems focused regenerative world, tillage is such an important and beneficial tool. And I'm getting back to the problem at hand that Christy has, setting up guidelines for retailers about what food products should be able to claim regenerative. And when there's a no-till, chemical-heavy sugar beet that's providing sugar or oats or grain or whatever, it's a tough pill for us to swallow as a retailer to allow those products to be claimed regenerative status. So we're looking for those things where we can draw the line for the average person, the average corporate buyer to say, yeah, no, we're following this guideline and this doesn't hack it. We also are pushing back against this claim that all tillage is bad and organic uses tillage. And if you don't live in the world the world of tension that we do, where people are making big decisions based on rhetoric, then yeah, don't go there. It's a complicated place to be. Christy, do you have anything you want to add at this moment before we move on to cultivation and the open mic session?
No, I think this is one, it's very educational, even for folks who know what's going on. The videos are very helpful to see what's happening, so we're all on the same page, so that as we talk about this, we all clearly understand that tillage practices are not the same. And I think this contrast, especially between smallholder farmers and large scale farms, it is fantastic because we can see that it is all systems and context dependent, and deciding what is appropriate for your particular system. And the contrast, especially, between Mr. Brown's operation and Anna's operation, totally different parts of the country and large scale versus small scale, I think is really important because we need also to be engaging people on both ends of the spectrum. We have so many smallholder farmers who are doing things and need the appropriate tools to be able to disturb the land appropriately for the benefit of soil health and growth, and that disturbance can come in multiple forms, and that while we might minimize overall soil disturbance, understanding the nuanced difference between what you can do on a small farm and what you can do on a large farm and the different kinds of equipment used. This is it's very beneficial. And I think for retailers like us, we're not experts. So learning from all of these farmers, all of you joining us and helping us be able to ask intelligent questions as we talk to brands, because what this comes again back to is how do we make a purchasing decision in a purchasing office as a retailer to say, how do we meet a customer expectation so that they understand when they are buying this product and maybe paying a little bit more for it, what does it mean, and does this match their customer expectation? So that's my main comment. Is I'm just really, really loving the discussion and the education so far. So this is great.
Has been really fun. We're going to move on to cultivation, and the typical person like me thinks tillage and cultivation are the same thing. For the purposes of this discussion, we're talking about cultivation as weed control in a field with crops growing. Bear with me, farmers. Anna's having a heart attack, but but the reason I'm framing it that way is that chemical cultivation is a huge part of no-till, huge part of chemical farming. In other words, you're running either a spray over a GMO crop and you're spraying Roundup or glufosinate or dicamba, whatever traits those crops can withstand, or you're spraying other things between rows, or you're spraying down a cover crop to terminate it before you use it or mow it or whatever. Cultivators in the organic and regenerative world are like this marvel now. And I'd kind of like each of you just to talk about the complexity and the fun equipment that's out there to take out a weed, to mound around crops at all of these different scales, and how that precludes the use of pesticides. Let me just see, synthetic toxic pesticides, and herbicides in those situations. Anyone want to chime in? Go ahead, Chris. You're muted though. There you go.
I'm going to go quick and then, turn it over to Anna. And, I want to say there is a wide diversity and has been a wide diversity of different types of cultivation tools in organic agriculture and in agriculture as a whole for a long time. And, the chemical-based agriculture has lost sight of these different types of tools that you could use. So, I think there's a lot of tools that we have had in the past and a lot of new innovations that are being made that can allow us to be able to manage weeds effectively. That being said, from my perspective, and especially, most of my career has been focused on arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and they're the organisms that are oftentimes thought of as being very impacted by tillage. And although this is true, we have a tendency to be very binary in our thinking. And so we think it's absolute. You do any types of tillage and it's going to completely eliminate all of the mycorrhizal fungi. And the soils and the microbes are very resilient and they're very easy to be able to self-regenerate. And this is what we're talking about in regenerative agriculture, is really being able to regenerate. The biggest issue that I find, and when I talk to organic farmers and I'm working with them, is when we are talking about your cultivation tools, for me and what I've seen in the data that I've collected over the years, is it's not as much about the tool that you use, the moldboard plow versus a basket weeder or a tine weeder or other things like that, because all of them are going to impact the microbial community, especially the mycorrhizal fungi. They all are going to have a differing level of impact on that. But I'll have a lot of organic producers that'll say, well, I'm only tilling, this deep, and it's, does that really have an effect? And yes, it does, because the mycorrhizal fungi are going to be there. They're usually there in, the first 5 inches of the soil. So you are going to be impacting them. You can't say that you're not. But what really ends up happening, in the way that I like to create analogies, and I said, every time you till, if I'm a mycorrhizal fungus, you may very well rip off one of my limbs and potentially tear down my house. And I say may and potentially because it isn't an absolute. But you rip off a limb or you tear down my house, and then, I spend my time and my energy regrowing my limb and rebuilding my house instead of doing my job, which is to help get nutrients from the soil and water from the soil. And I can't do my job because all that I'm doing is spending time doing that. If I have enough time between tillage events to start doing my job, that's good. But if you do a lot of cultivation, so even in season cultivation, if you're doing that repeatedly over and over and over again, I'm spending all of my time as a mycorrhizal fungus rebuilding my limbs and rebuilding my house, regrowing limbs and rebuilding my house, regrowing limbs, build my house. I can't do my job. And so eventually I don't get any more food from the plant and I die. And that
Thanks.
isn't
Yeah,
an
that's
effective
awesome.
part to do that.
Anna,
Yeah.
I'm going to get you in a second, but I just want to remind people that on the session page for tillage, Elizabeth, maybe you put that in the chat again, but I did spend a day watching tillage and cultivation videos, and I got the best of the best for you with the really good soundtracks. And the number of different cultivation techniques right now is super cool. And then when you add AI, lasers, and UVC, and automated robotic picking of weeds, it becomes a whole nother world. I think it's going to really change this idea of chemical no-till when the chemical companies are investing in the robotic companies. And I just wanted to park that. Now, and I'm going to get to you because I know you're chomping at the bit, but Mr. Brown, you deal with weeds, but I'll bet that you want to deal with them as little as possible. So what is your core technique? You've talked about grasses, but during the season, how often do you actually disturb that soil with tines or hose or whatever? What's your deep experience on that at your level of farming?
Like I say, when I prepare my soil to plant seeds or put out plants, that's the only time I do any tilling with machines or that type of thing. Once I planted my plants and they start growing, and there are going to be some weeds and some grass and stuff, I use hand tools. I don't have a large field of that type of thing to use large equipment. So it's mostly hand tools. And the less grass that I have, the less I have to use hand tools, and the less time I have to do other things. So my situation with hand tools, all I use is a tiller. And every once in a while, I have some row crops that I can put a plow in there and do a little bit of plowing, but very little. But most of my tilling, once I do use the tiller, is hand tools, hose and that type of stuff, but very little heavy equipment. Well, you see my small tractor. That's the biggest tractor I got here, and that does me fine. But most of my stuff is done with a hand tiller or a hoe or something like that. So that's how and pulling up weeds from here and there. That's the most of the thing that I do as far as controlling weeds and grass and stuff like that. But the important part of my situation is to not let them suckers grow. So I have to get to them very early. Once they sprout up, that's when I start hoeing. And that takes care of my situation as far as weeds is concerned. Once you let them get big, it takes up too much time to get rid of them. But when
So
they're
I want
real
to make
small,
the observation from iPhone's perspective that they're hosting the website for us. We think there's a million and a half small farms like yours. You're part of the USDA and certified organic, but most of them are not. They're growing food for themselves, their families, and their communities. And there's a lot of human labor involved. And we somehow got to this ethic that manual labor should be avoided at all costs. Now, I've hoed fields. I don't advocate. Well, I'd advocate for my kids to get out there, learn something. But you see what I'm seeing, that a lot of food's being produced under the radar, to use a term, and that it does take human labor to do that.
it takes quite a bit of human labor. I get up in the morning and I have to pull weeds or hoe or stuff like that. And like I say, the less weeds that you let mature, the less time you have to do manual labor. And my situation is to get rid of those weeds when they're very, very small. Once they come up a half an inch, a quarter of an inch off the ground, that's the time to get rid of them. And most of my stuff is hand tools. And
Yeah.
that
So
has
Anna,
worked fine for me.
let's go back to Anna. How many thousands of acres of weeds are you growing every year? What are your best practices in your 7-year cycle?
It's plant biomass. So yeah, I'll just riff on a few things here. First of all, like this piece on the people, we really need to come back to that because we've created an agricultural system that rejects people. People don't feel like they have a part of it. We had an apprentice program for quite a while. We have not been able to find people that want to come and stay and grow an enterprise on our operation. And that makes me really sad. We've shifted to H-2A labor. I have 6 individuals from South Africa here on H-2A visas that are so excited to work and so excited to learn about organic farming. And Alania, on the ROC, we have to have this conversation every year because these guys just want to work. They want to make money. And I've got to manage the hours that they're working. So like there's a people part of this that I think we really need to talk. Nationally, I think there's something like 40,000 people come on H-2A visas to support the U.S. agriculture. The second thing I'd say back to Chris and this idea of like destroying houses and arms. And I think most definitely we got to think about where is that disturbance. In nature, there is a give and a take. There's a reciprocity. And whereas you as a farmer are giving back. And it's not just your soil microbes. It's like all those millions of pollinators. Where is their home? Where is their life? Like if there's no ecological borders or safe places, and we're on the edge of the prairie potholes, and we have a lot of migratory birds and antelope, and they're all part of our family. So I like to say, like, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's less than 5 people per square mile, but we actually never farm alone. You never farm alone. You have your team, and then you have your like ecological team with you. So back to our cultivation, on our system, we are solid seeding fields. So we're not doing row crops like they have in the Midwest where there's like rows of corn and you cultivate. It's all about preparing the seed bed up front. So we do a passive tillage to prep the seed bed. Then our air seeder comes through with our grains or lentils. And then that also has some tillage tools on it. So what happens is we do that first pass and then we wait 10 days or so. The weed seedlings come up and then you knock them out with your planter or your air seeder. And then you're the thing that you're seeding, and we're seeding at higher seed rates than recommended for chemical systems. So the seed that we're seeding is the thing that we want to grow and give it a competitive advantage. And then we let our fields sit the whole rest of the year till harvest. That's for the cash crops. The cover crops, we don't till before that. We go in usually with a diverse mix right into the stubble from last year of whatever crop was there before. And then we terminate them. It's wet water moisture. So we're terminating cover crops now. We like to do that a little earlier, but we've had awesome moisture this year. And one of the tools we use for that is a blade plow. It's a giant V blade, like 5-foot blades that just slice right under the plant. And then you lay the plant biomass stays on top of the soil and engages and goes back in. So it's really about, how are you armoring your soil? What roots are growing? And for us, like, weeds are not necessarily a bad thing. Like, where are they? And our crop rotation actually helps us manage weeds and pest cycles tremendously.
Yeah, a whole nother complication. I'm glad you mentioned that, but maybe we'll have a whole topic on that. But one of the things that you're describing is what conventional people will be called a dirty field. Wheat with grass, legumes with old rye or something. And from an organic perspective, those are actually healthy fields, which you touched on. And then when they're harvested, they go to a grain elevator, which does this magic of separating all of those different seeds and grades out from one each other. Do you use that grain elevator process for cleaning as part of your system?
This is part of the crazy making, is that you don't get to just farm and do the ecology. You actually have to write grants and get grain cleaners and stand up a packing line, which we're all doing. And we do have air screen grain cleaners. So as we've been in that's great, because what does that do? If the whole issue is sustainability, then we're cleaning the stuff on the farm. We're leaving the weed seeds on the farm. We're either selling those off on a feed market or putting them in our compost pile. And then we're not trucking extra weed seeds. We also, it impacts our harvest too. So we typically can't just go right into a field and with the straight cut combine head and cut things and then put it in the bin and you're done and it's clean. We do have weeds. We have that diversity of plants. And so we swath everything in advance. We put everything into a windrow and you let it dry down. I mean, you're really working with nature here too. So you let it dry down and then you can come through with a combine with a different head and that cleans the weed seeds out a little better because things have dried down, and then we run them through our cleaner. The trick is like you're working with natural systems here. So we have had increasing variability in our weather. It used to be like you can always depend on rain in this time of the year. That helps your crops get going. And like that's why we could have agriculture in the Northern Great Plains area. Well, now we've had, last year it rained during harvest. It never rains during harvest. I had rye in a swath that now no longer meets the milling quality because it got rained on. So as a farmer, like, what do I do with that? So this is also part of this ecosystem of buyers and processors. Like, we need to be working on how we're sharing the risk of a different production system on a planet with an unstable climate together.
Yeah, that's super well said. I'd like to ask all of you a general and kind of soft question, but Mr. Brown, you're growing food for your community, your family. Do they consider you part of that community? Are they know that they're dependent on you? Do they help you and support you?
Yes, in my situation here, I am involved with a lot of places where I deliver food to food markets, these marketplaces. I'm incorporated with Augusta Locally Grown. Is a nonprofit situation where they distribute foods to people that are on welfare and food stamps and stuff like that. I participate with them quite a bit. I participate a lot in food markets, food markets, and I'm very active in my community as far as vegetables is concerned. I have been awarded a couple of awards from my county and stuff like that, but I'm very in tune with my area here. And raising vegetables the way I do, I get involved with my community quite a bit. And that has, I guess, energized me as far as doing what I'm doing. I'm not I'm not a young man, you say, Mike, right now. And I don't do a whole lot of stuff that I did 10, 20 years ago. But I'm very much involved with my community here in Augusta. And
So Kurt, thank you for
that's
that.
helped me out quite a bit.
That's actually optimistic and encouraging for me. And I think the other audience
Being
members,
involved with the community is a good thing for me. And it helps me get up in the morning and do what I got to do and stuff like that. But it keeps me going. And being a part of your community I think is a very important part of anybody's life. And anybody's community, you get involved and it helps the day go by. And,
Mr. Brown, do your
it's
people,
good
just
for me.
a quick answer, do your people
I appreciate it.
understand,
Yeah, that's how I feel about
the value
working
of organic? Do
Yeah.
they understand the value of organic and regenerative farming? Is this something that they really get? Or they just love the fact that your food is so good? Well, let me ask you that, Chris. Are we seeing that the general public out there is getting the message here? Or are they as confused as ever?
I think they're pretty confused. I'm always surprised when I talk with people. And I think part of it is a power of language and a power of messaging, because you have things not just in regenerative and the muddiness of what the word regenerative means and things like that. But I was always surprised, and I talked to people who, some of them are very knowledgeable people about the food system. They'll say that non-GMO means that they're not using any pesticides. And I'm like, that's not what non-GMO means. But because it has non, consumers basically think it's non means nothing bad. And so they'll equate non-GMO with organic, but they don't understand what organic means, because organic doesn't have a word that they can understand very easily. Me as a scientist, organic, my first thing is always organic and organic chemistry, and it's got carbon in it and hydrogen and oxygen, but that's not also the same type of a thing. So words have power, and the more knowledge we can put behind words is really good. I think it's really good, just to touch on what Mr. Brown was saying. You have farmers that are in areas that have really good access to communities. But, I've lived and worked most of my life in the Great Plains, in the Northern Great Plains, and in the plains in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and, now in Minnesota. And when you're a minimum of 200 miles from a big enough community to help to support you, that is very, very difficult. And, I just was hosting a visitor from California, and we were discussing this. And I said, basically, if you went straight west between Minneapolis, there is no city the size of Minneapolis, St. Paul, until you hit Seattle. All across that band where Anna is, and you've got a huge agricultural band there. And we're not, because of those logistic issues, and there's a lot of internal and external logistic issues that have happened within our food system, we're not growing food in the United States. Since 2019, we have had an agricultural trade deficit in the US. Last year, it was a $50 billion deficit. This year, it's projected to be somewhere around $25 to $30 billion. The biggest positive trade we have ever had in US history has been $30 billion. So we've had a positive trade balance of $30 billion, but our deficit has exceeded the most. So when we talk about, we're feeding the world, we're not even feeding ourselves. And so, it's great we've got these communities and we've got farmers like Mr. Brown, but we need to figure out how we can have this across the entire United States, that we're growing food again in these areas, and we have the infrastructure and the retailers support and the entire support system to help to support that, because we're going to continue to be, and as an agronomic country, we talk about things that are part of our GDP and all of those types of things, but agronomy is really what provides us with value. It provides us with a capital to get loans, is our land space and our agronomic value. And if we can't even feed ourselves, and that's the way things are seen on a global environment, why would we even get any country valuing us as a nation when we're not utilizing our agricultural land appropriately? Sorry,
we are getting,
I'm off.
Yeah, we're getting to Q&A time here. I'm going to hand this off to Ms. Elizabeth Bennett here. And we've learned the hard way that I'm going to try to be really quiet while she manages Q&A. But this is a chance for everybody who's online to pose some questions. Remember to check out those videos, but also remember you can submit written comments in many different ways to get your thoughts on the table. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so I wanted to say that Chris has done a really awesome job of sending me a couple notes and being a good educator as we go through this. I find it really interesting. Christine Root had asked Chris specifically if we can circle back to explain how deep moldboard plowing actually helps the soil. And she's curious, does it directly help the soil? Is it more about helping the weed management and improving yield?
So deep moldboard plowing, and Anna will probably be able to address this as well, but deep moldboard plowing can help the soil. Again, I think, and this was an important point that I made, is that we need to really identify, we've got a lot of tools, identify the ones that are going to be most effective and use those tools. So if you do need to be managing some weeds, and especially, we run in the plains to thistle and some deep rooted weeds, and using a deep plow is really going to be the most effective tool to help to manage some of those weeds. But deep plowing, and I appreciate, Alan's shared a lot of different types of tillage tools. There is and I worked with a rancher in Alberta who we've been discussing utilizing a subsoiler, because sometimes we get, even with a regenerative multi-paddock grazing types of a system, you get areas of compaction that may be, a 6 inches to a foot to even 2 feet down. And utilizing a deep plow may be able to help to alleviate some of that. Again, doing disturbance, and even with a deep plow, is really a good way to help to reset the system and get things restarted and reinvigorated. We've learned that there's a lot that is really benefited by some level of disturbance. And, as I put in my remarks, the biggest issue with disturbance is how often are you doing that disturbance? Because that's where you start seeing the cumulative negative effects, is how often are you doing that disturbance, not so much the types of disturbance that it is that you're doing. So I think that's a really important point to make, is I would say it's both. It's both a soil health tool. It also can be a soil destructive tool. Again, nothing is binary, especially in a biological world. It isn't a yes, no, it isn't a, does this, doesn't do that type of a thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Anna, if you've got time or you want to make a comment on that.
I would just add, so my sister is a smaller scale 23-acre vegetable farm doing a lot of community great stuff in Southwest Washington. So April and I get a lot of discussions. And we had this discussion about tillage, years ago. And April's analogy was, you can have a butcher knife and you can do two different things with that butcher knife. You can go after and kill somebody with that butcher knife, or you can have raised a really beautiful heirloom pig who ate really good, who provided stuff back to your soil, who took care of, and you are going to take every piece of that pig and use it, and you use the butcher knife to do the butchery. Same tool, two completely different outcomes, two completely different contexts. So there's a human component here of the intent and the purpose, and what you're doing. So yeah, nothing more to add. Definitely yes, reset, yes on weeds. You got to think about it.
Awesome.
That's why we need more farmers and not so much AI. We're outsourcing the most important tool we have, guys.
I will say, Robert Brewer did have to hop off, but he left a question for you guys. He asked the panel, are we seeing an increase in soil organic matter and beneficial biology in the tillage practices that we've discussed during this panel? Is tillage allowed in, or he said, tillage is allowed in organic. Soil health is the differentiation, in his opinion, between regenerative and organic. And then he said Chris is right, but I'll let you guys talk about it.
Well, I think just to really quick on that, I think, the biggest thing that we need to be looking at from my perspective, and I've said this many times, is, I really do appreciate the no-till movement, and I've worked on all spectrums with all different types of farmers throughout my career. And, but no-till sort of has kind of, I think, overplayed its hand a little bit when it comes to organic matter and soil health. And the reason that I say this is that soil health is regenerating the soil, and soil is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's organic matter bound to sand, silt, and clay. And you can't regenerate the soil unless you're getting organic matter, carbon coming into the soil. Tillage is a tool that can stop, if you do no-till, can stop the carbon loss. But you're not necessarily doing that influx of carbon. And I think Anna and Mr. Brown both really said this over and over again, that, they may use some tillage tools, but it's really about then getting plants in there and getting that growing. And that is the biggest thing that I have found in the data that I've looked at, is you could do no-till for 50 years, chemical no-till for 50 years. And yes, you get an increase in organic matter initially, but then you plateau and it goes nowhere. And if you don't couple no-till, whether it's organic no-till or chemical no-till, if you don't couple no-till with putting plants back in, cover cropping, diversity, companion cropping, adding perennials, putting animals back onto the landscape, if you're not coupling it with those things, we're not going to build organic matter, because those are the things that are bringing carbon back in. So tillage is, you can't add carbon with an iron tool, no matter what kind of an iron tool it is. Iron tools do not put carbon in the ground. So taking them away does not automatically put carbon in the ground. Putting them back doesn't automatically put carbon in the ground. It is about a system where you've got the plants included.
Absolutely. And to circle back a little bit, I know Anna had mentioned having cattle on her farm, and Mr. Brown had mentioned goats. And when we look at the sort of mechanical advantage of livestock as a tilling agent, do any of you guys want to talk about that? The way, obviously, that impacts soil, organic matter, all of those kinds of things. And Alan's pulling this up because we're about to talk about ruminant livestock in the context of all of this.
Elizabeth, I can just jump in here. Like Doug kind of avoided, like, do we want cows? Like, we knew, like, nature has animals, right? Nature has animals and plants in an integrated working together system. So we're just trying to replicate that in our agricultural farming system. And it took us a while to say, like, can we really do the animals? Because it's a whole nother thing to manage. It's a whole nother thing to manage beating hearts, as Will Harris said. And we've got like 600 of them, and another 100 are on their way getting unloaded here in another couple hours. And all the fencing and the care and the water hauling that goes with that. So I think we're into year 5 of having animals. This year is the most we've ever had. It's going to be really interesting. But the thing is, they're processing rather than a tillage pass where we're spending money to have fuel and a tractor and terminate our cover crops. We're using grazing to terminate those cover crops. And then the ruminant of the animal is like chewing it up, and they're leaving you some nice patties and some urine, and like it's all part of that system. And because of our pollinator work, we've done a lot of work with Xerces Society. So did you guys know that dung beetles can fly 30 miles to go find a pile of poop. Like, we didn't have animals on many of our land for a long time. When we took in new land, no animals, right, other than the wildlife. There was like no dung beetles, and now they are like appearing. They're everywhere. Like, nature's unstoppable. We just have to find the right ways to work with her.
Absolutely. Mr. Brown, did you want to add anything about your own experience with, I think you mentioned goats on your property?
I use my goats mostly on my grazing property. Very seldom they get in the area where I do any harvesting of my growing vegetables. They mostly get in there in the wintertime when I do a cover crop, and I have them in there eating up the cover crops. That's feeding the animals. I use them then, but other than that, I do not use them in a field where I grow vegetables. I grow vegetables just about year round, so I'm having something growing all the time. So I can't put them goats in there and they eat up my vegetables. So they're there just for a short period of time, and but I use them very little as far as regenerating my soil and stuff like that. I have to bring in organic matter to improve my soil instead of animals. But I use them very little. But I put organic matter into my soil to keep it where I can grow good vegetables, keep my soil in good health. Health, you might say. It's a thing, just something I do. But the most important part is knowing where your soil is at. What type of, whether it need whether it need phosphorus or zinc or lime or whatever it needs. You have to be aware of that at all times when you're doing small scale farming like myself. And that has worked out fine for me. I do a lot of soil samples and stuff like that. I do soil sample twice a year, and to make sure that I know what to put in that soil in order to grow quality vegetables. That's on a small scale. I'm looking at y'all talking about vegetables, hundreds and hundreds of acres. I admire that, but my situation is very small, and I grow vegetables year round, and I involve with my community year round, selling vegetables and growing vegetables. So that's my situation as far as animals is concerned. They're in my field very little. Yeah, that's my situation with the animals.
Thank you for that. Back to me, I have a question texted to me. Someone's having technical issues. This is from Karen Howard, the Executive Director of Organic and Natural Health Association. She's focused on the cumulative effect of pesticides, synthetic toxic pesticides, on ecology, on kids, on animals, on waterways, and on air. And this is all one of those things, to be bluntly honest, that chemical no-till doesn't want to talk about, and Bayer doesn't want to talk about, and Syngenta doesn't want to talk. All the fertilizer companies don't want to talk about. But I'm actually dialed in from the Organic Produce Summit in Monterey, and I'm on a panel tomorrow called Food is Medicine. And we're talking about healing people with organic, quality, nutrient-dense organic food, or more importantly right now, preventing illness by preventing contamination by chemical-laden foods. And this all goes through the gut microbiome, through the skin, the lungs, or whatever. The question here is, I know I'm triggering all of you in really good ways, but is this a viable rhetorical argument moving forward to remind people that public health depends on healthy food? Anyone want to chime in?
I would say definitely public health depends on healthy food. Public health also depends on care of ecosystems and stewardship of land. In Montana, we have 18 million acres of cropland. Less than 1% of that is certified organic. So you can only imagine what's happening, right? There's glyphosate in our rainwater. I think the core lever that all of us together have to figure out how to solve is how do we actually compensate farmers for doing that land care? Because that land care is above and beyond and goes on regardless of quarterly profit reporting cycles than what the cost of food is. And until we can solve that problem, we're not going to have more than 2% of the current US population trying to make a living in production agriculture. 80% of farms have someone working an off-farm job. We were no different until last year. So I'm a little bit on my soapbox here, but I think it's important to have these systems conversations and then say collectively, as people that all really care about really good food, you can't have really good food without really good ecosystem care, and you can't have really good ecosystem care unless you have people on the land.
Now, Chris, you study the microbiome. You got a 30-second soundbite for us? What are we doing to ourselves in this chemical-laden environment?
What we're doing is we are not getting the antioxidants and polyphenolics and the complex biomolecules in our food system anymore. When we aren't utilizing the biology to provide some of the nutrients, as Mr. Brown mentioned, as far as some of the micronutrients that are there, we can't get the micronutrients be absorbable by the plant and utilizable by the plant without the microbial community helping to do that. Many of the cofactors, some directly, some antioxidants, as well as many of their cofactors and parts of their molecules come from the soil microbiome. And so there is no way to get them into our food system without having that microbiome. And the way that microbiome helps to provide nutrients to the plant is the same ways that our gut microbiome helps to provide nutrients to us. So it may not be the same organisms, but a lot of the biochemistry is the same. And we need to really focus in on that.
So, Mr. Brown, let's give you the last word since we're right on time. But is this what motivates you, keeping the kids in your community healthy and keep them from getting sick?
Yes, I'd like to expound a little bit on that as far as healthy food is concerned. In my area, I grow organic vegetables. And in my situation, I cannot grow enough organic vegetables to feed my community. I sell 90% of the stuff that I raise, and I have no problem doing that because organic vegetables are more healthier and they're more nutritious to you, and it cuts down on medical problems. All of our medical problems comes from the stuff that we eat. And the more pure the food that we eat, the better our bodies are. And I'm learning that as I grow organic vegetables, more and more folks are being aware of that. So I can't grow enough vegetables because every time I grow something, it's sold. So it is very important that we try to get more people into growing organic vegetables without all these chemicals in them. And the way to do that is to improve our soil so that we can grow these vegetables without these chemicals. A lot of our vegetables come from farms that grow stuff synthetically. And a large percent of our community that consume these things develop problems from that, healthy problems. So I encourage everybody to get into organic farming because it helps all of us. This is the thing that I preach quite a bit in my community. I have the technical school and the college that is in my area. They visit me quite a bit, and I preach this. Keeping synthetic particles out of your food improves your health. And I try to encourage a lot of people to eat healthier by enjoying organic food. But it's kind of hard to get people to go to the problem of growing organic food. They say it's too much problems, you can't do this and you can't do that. But once you get into it, I found out if you get it into a routine, you have no problem doing it. And it's no different than growing any other vegetables. But you have to get in tune to it in order for that to happen. That's the situation I see here in my community.
I don't think there's a better note we could end on. So thank you so much. That's pretty inspirational right there.
Organic food. That's my thing on as far as organic vegetables is concerned.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Mr. Brown. Thanks to everyone else. Comments from everyone were super helpful to help set these guardrails that we're working on for shoppers and brands and retail buyers. And we got into the complication of systems thinking and systems within systems, which we embrace, but we also, I think, pulled out some really good takeaways. It is my duty to put up the advertisement of our next session as we close out here. I've got Will Harris and Matt Mayer on this, and I've got another secret panelist I can't talk about quite yet. But this is going to be really fun. Again, systems thinking from Thousand Hills beef and pork, and of course, White Oak pastures. Thank you so much. Any last words, Elizabeth? Christy?
I did leave a couple of notes in the chat from people who were messaging me right here at the end, but I will let everyone get on with their afternoon.
The video and audio tracks will be up on the website session page within at least no more than a day, potentially tonight. So, and all of the other sessions have been recorded as well if you'd like to multitask and listen in. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate you, Mr. Brown, Chris, Anna. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.